Hello everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team, where we give you our real take on today's housing market and everything to do with real estate. I'm your host, Maddie Maloney, joined by my co-hosts,
Joe Sambear
and Sam Feta.
So today we're going to be talking about a topic that maybe you've heard of in the news, but if you are a first-time homebuyer or going to be joining the home buying search here anytime soon, just something that you should be aware of, because there have been some changes to how buyers can view homes, and there are some financing implications as well. So today we are going to be going over the NAR settlement. So we're going to start off with a little bit of the history, why this settlement came to be, and then how it affects current home buyers, how it affects how you are going to be viewing a home, and then also a little bit of the financing and how it may affect how much you're going to be pre-approved for, some of the different mortgage options. So Joe, let's start with a little bit of the history of why this NAR settlement even came to be.
Yeah, going back about 5 years, there's a series of cases against real estate brokerage firms and the National Association of Realtors. And in May, as a result of those cases, the National Association of Realtors settled a series of these class action lawsuits alleging that its compensation rules, which forced selling agents to advertise compensation for buyers agents on listings. So basically, it gets a little complex, and to try to simplify it as much as possible, the plaintiffs alleged that there was some antitrust activity in these brokerage firms where the broker realtors were saying that you were forced to pay this type of compensation from a listing, like a certain percentage. And I would say that the defendants and the National Association of Realtors and the industry would disagree with that. There's a lot of arguing between the two parties. Even if today you got them in the room, they would retry the case, I'm pretty sure, in front of us.
Sure.
But that being said, the lawsuits played out. There was a settlement. The industry has agreed that moving forward, there's going to be some changes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what's important for the buyers or sellers to understand, that there has been some changes. Buyer's agent compensation and listing agent compensation is still going to be paid by someone. Mm-hmm. And so now it's just going to summarize it the best we can, is there's going to be more transparency and more discussion up front. I think that's the takeaway. Is before, I think everyone kind of got in the habit of, I want to see this house. Here's a purchase agreement. I'm going to sign all the documents and be done with it and start pursuing a mortgage and closing. Where now I think there's going to be more discussion up front of, okay, let me explain, I'm a buyer's agent, let me explain my value to you, let me explain the relationship, let me explain more detailed how I get compensated, whether that's you as a buyer paying me directly or the listing agent or the seller paying the listing agent who's paying me. So there's going to be more communication and clarification up front. Yeah, that's the key piece.
Exactly, because it was essentially pre-negotiated for buyers agents looking at homes for their clientele that's going to be purchasing. They're knowing right up front what they're going to get paid, not realizing that the buyer themselves actually are paying that in a sense because it's included in the purchase price. It was
built into the purchase price, and it wasn't clear that they were actually, it wasn't true then, and it's not true now that the buyer doesn't pay any compensation because the concept is is built into your price. So you can be splitting hairs here a little bit, but I think that's the key. Is there's going to be a new standard of practice as far as how buyer's agent engage with customers before they show a house. They're going to want to sit down and have this conversation and have these documents signed. And that all went to impact this past Saturday, which was August 17th, I think, was the actual date of the settlement. And for the foreseeable future, that's the kind of conversation that's going to happen. You're not just going to walk into a property with a buyer's agent without having that conversation and having an agreement in place.
And that's something you want to fully be aware of when you're talking with your buyer's agent. And now in our local market here in Michigan, the Greater Lansing Association of Realtors purchase agreement form, they've added a line right on there to account for who's paying the buyer's agent's commission. So that's something you're going to know ahead of time as a buyer, working with your buyer's agent, making sure that
as you're putting that offer together,
exactly,
you'll learn what is the listing, what is the seller willing to pay, or do we have to incorporate this in the purchase agreement? So I think it goes back to things we've said before in this podcast, is finding a value agent who has your interest in mind and doing everything way up front. So instead of waiting till a Saturday where that one house comes available and now you want to see it in 2 hours, you could engage with that agent weeks in advance saying, this is kind of what we're looking for. I don't think there's anything in the market right now, but let's have this conversation so that when something comes in the market, we're prepared, because that's going to put you in the best position to win.
Absolutely. So let's get into those changes and how it looks a little bit different now. So if you were a home buyer, say a couple of months ago, and you did want to see just one house right away, you could have just gotten an agent to go view this home. Now, before you go view this home, you are going to need to sign a buyer's agent compensation agreement beforehand, before getting into a home. So you'll get with your agent, you'll sign this, and then you can go see the home. Now, also, the commission, it's not going to be posted on the MLS. And so that is going to happen when you see the negotiations. So the agent will still be able to find out exactly what is going to be offered. And that's where we get into a little bit of how it's going to be affecting financing. So up front, you may say that you're going to be paying, say, 3% for the buyer's agent's commission. Well, Sam, can you get into a little bit about what happens if maybe they're only offering 1% or 2% on the commission? How is that going to impact them, and what are some of our solutions that we have?
Yeah, so with that, again, that's being as prepared as possible up front with your buyer's agent, making sure you're speaking with them in advance. If you even, are thinking about it in the market, it doesn't hurt to speak with an agent ahead of time and really find someone you like, find someone you trust that is going to do a good job for you to act in your best interest. But as a new home buyer, if you come across a listing where they're not paying any commission, the seller side is not going to pay any commission to the buyer's agent. That's something that, we can help work into the, financing side, to where, the buyer's agent typically is not going to work for free. Essentially, they do have value. They, are working very hard for you during a long transaction to make sure everything goes in your favor. So that's really, you want to find an agent that offers value, is going to do a good job for you. And then, if the listing side isn't offering any commission, that's something we can run numbers for.
And really, there's going to be, if we take that off the table, if they're not paying any compensation to your buyer's agent, there's really going to be 3 options. First option is that you present a new offer to them with maybe a different price point, negotiate it in. That would be option 1. The second option is, you'd mentioned 3% in that example. Not that that's the number, but in that example, maybe you were putting 10% down. Well, we would put together an option of, okay, what does 7% look like as a down payment? So you're putting a little bit less down because you need that cash for the compensation. And then the third option is you're just paying it all cash. So you're putting 10% down, or whatever the minimum down payment is in that situation, and then you're just paying your agent cash. So really, there's 3 different scenarios that are available.
And what we want to do up front is we're going to go through worst case scenarios with you. We want to make sure that we have a plan if they're not going to be offering that additional buyer's agent compensation. So before you even get into the home, we know, okay, so this is what we can do, this is what we can offer, this is what you're going to be comfortable with. So it's all about the prior planning, getting with us as soon as you can, especially if you're a first-time home buyer that wants to do the minimal down payment. It may be a little bit trickier then to get it financed if they're not going to be offering any of the compensation, but there's always going to be something that we can do. We can look at different options. So get with your lender, get with your agent as soon as you think that you're going to be looking at a home, because there is a little bit more planning that needs to go into buying a home now with this settlement. Now, it's not to say that, this is going to be terrible. It's going to make home affordability even worse. There's always going to be more options. It's great that there's going to be a little bit more transparency. As we said before, you know exactly what you're getting into. The buyer's agent, not much has changed. They're just going to tell you exactly what their value is and have that conversation up front. And then we're just going to work with you on the financing options and know what your future goals are and work with you to make sure that we can make this work no matter what property that you're going to look at. But it is going to depend a little bit property by property now. So it's not going to be, if you're pre-approved for this amount, it's going to be a blanket approval. It may vary by property depending on what they're going to offer for compensation. So it's just so important. We say this all the time, but it's so important to have a team that's on your side that knows exactly what your financial situation is. We know exactly how much cash you have in the bank to work with. We don't want you to become completely depleted of all your funds to get into this home, because we want to set you up for success. So it's just all about having that conversation up front.
And I think you'll find is, we don't really know what the implication is. I don't think anyone really knows what the new standard is going to be, if sellers are going to continue just to pay what they've done previously, if it's going to feel like it used to be. We don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But we just want to approach it from analytical position of, okay, what's the best way for you to do this? How do we protect you? How do we protect the transaction to accomplish this for you? I do think that you'll find, depending on who you worked with previously with a buyer's agent, if this is your second or third transaction, you may have already had that conversation last time. I mean, some of the realtors we work with, I know for sure, did have that conversation, did sit down and say, this is how I get compensated, and actually did have you sign a buyer's agency agreement before seeing a house. So for some people, it might seem very similar to what has happened previously.
Absolutely. And sometimes you might hear in the news, it's going to really affect affordability or all this other negative stuff. Well, in some cases, in a lot of cases, there really might not be a lot that changed.
Yeah.
Like Joe said, the realtors are already having this conversation. Typically, what we have seen, sellers are still offering to pay that buyer's compensation. So really, we're just going to be preparing you for worst case scenario if something like this comes up. But it's not to say that you're going to have to pay out of pocket for this. It's not going to always be the case. We're just here to prepare you, just to make sure that we have options no matter what property you're going into, and that you're going to be secure and not have to use all your funds. So any final comments on the NAR settlement? I think the overarching, theme that we want to get through is just, have that team on your side. Make sure you're having these conversations with your lender to go over worst case scenario. And maybe also don't believe everything that's in the news as well. There's so much fear mongering that goes on, clickbait to get you scared about the housing market or whatever that's going on. So, get with people, plan ahead of time, plan for that worst case scenario, and you will be just fine in this new market. So today, we went over, a little bit of the history of the NAR settlement, how it came to be, some of the implications of how it affects current home buyers, and then how it's going to be affecting financing and some of your mortgage options. So thank you so much for joining us today on today's episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team. If you liked today's episode, please like, comment, share this. Let us know if you have any questions, if there's anything that you want to hear us talk about in the future, and we will catch you next time on Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team. Thank you so much.